If you're living with a Shih Tzu, or even if you've only spent a few days around one, you'll quickly notice a slightly uncomfortable but very real truth. Shih Tzus don't operate like any other dog you've known. And if you're trying to raise them using the logic you apply to other breeds, chances are you're exhausting yourself while they're simply confused about what's going on. I'm not saying this from books alone. It comes from years working with canine behavior, studying neurobiology, and observing hundreds of real Shih Tzu households. Shih Tzus were not born to work, not born to obey, and certainly not born to prove that they're well-trained. They were bred for one purpose only: to be close to humans. It sounds simple, but this is the root of almost every behavior that makes owners both deeply in love and quietly overwhelmed. While many other breeds carry the DNA of hunters, herders, or guardians, Shih Tzus were selectively bred for thousands of years to do just one thing: be a companion in enclosed human spaces. Not to run fields, not to guard territory, not to complete tasks. That's why Shih Tzus don't have extreme exercise needs, don't obsess over commands, and don't feel driven to prove competence. For them, the greatest reward has always been your presence. Many people label Shih Tzus as clingy, but from a behavioral science perspective, that's a misunderstanding. Shih Tzus aren't clingy. They are wired for emotional synchronization. When you move, they move. When you sit, they sit beside you. When you're tense, their nervous system tightens too. And when you're calm, slow, and consistent, something remarkable happens. The Shih Tzu becomes easier to live with without you having to teach anything new. Even their physical appearance reflects this role. Their short muzzle, large eyes, and unique respiratory structure mean Shih Tzus were never designed to tolerate heat, prolonged stress, or intense physical exertion. Their bodies don't match a fast, high-pressure lifestyle. When you force them to live at a pace that's too intense, they respond with wheezing, stress behaviors, stubbornness, or withdrawal. Not because they're weak, but because their body is signaling overload. And then there's the stubborn reputation, the reason many people give up on training Shih Tzus altogether. The truth is simple. Shih Tzus aren't unintelligent. They just don't do things that feel meaningless to them. They don't act to please you emotionally. They act when they feel safe and see value. Once you understand that, everything about training changes. Fewer commands, less pressure, more positive motivation, and most importantly, respect for their emotional rhythm. Ironically, this is exactly why Shih Tzus fit modern life so well. Small apartments, city homes, elderly owners, busy professionals, as long as there is real presence, Shih Tzus adapt beautifully. They don't need large spaces. They need one consistent human to be near. And if you've ever wondered why a Shih Tzu often chooses one person in the household above all others, it isn't random. They bond most deeply with the person who provides the highest level of nervous system safety, not the one who feeds them the most, but the one whose voice, movements, and emotional energy allow their body to settle. So if you've made it this far, here's something worth sitting with. Are you raising a Shih Tzu or trying to turn a Shih Tzu into a different kind of dog? Understanding their true nature doesn't just make life easier, it makes the relationship deeper. And if you recognized yourself somewhere in this story, leave a comment. If you want to understand Shih Tzus not through hacks, but through science and lived experience, stay with this channel, because the longer you live with them, the clearer it becomes. Shih Tzus don't arrive to be trained, they arrive to reflect the way you live each day. And if you're nodding along at this point, you've probably experienced a very familiar scene. A small shadow following you everywhere in the house, from the living room to the kitchen, from the kitchen to the bathroom, then back to the sofa again. Many first-time Shih Tzu owners worry and ask themselves, am I spoiling my dog? Is this unhealthy dependence? As someone who has worked in canine behavior for many years, my answer is very direct: no. Shih Tzus don't stay close because they lack independence. They stay close because their brains evolved to treat human presence as the safest possible state. After centuries living in enclosed palace environments, what mattered most to Shih Tzus wasn't speed, endurance, or hunting instinct, but the ability to read emotions, regulate rhythm, and remain calm alongside humans. That's why Shih Tzus are rarely obsessed with chasing balls, guarding doors, or barking alerts. When you leave the house and close the door, what they experience isn't abandonment, but a disruption of a familiar emotional state. And when you return, their intense excitement isn't drama, it's biology. The safe state has come back. If you're raising a Shih Tzu, try asking yourself one honest question. Are you expecting your dog to be task-driven, or are you allowing it to exist in the role it was designed for? Many behavioral issues disappear the moment owners stop comparing Shih Tzus to working breeds. If someone has ever told you, Shih Tzus are boring, they just follow people around, comment companion below, and see how many others share your experience. If you're living with a Shih Tzu and feel more understood through this video, give it a like so the algorithm helps spread a more accurate perspective on this breed. And if you want to continue understanding Shih Tzus through science, real-life experience, and genuine empathy, don't forget to subscribe. The next parts will make one thing even clearer. Shih Tzus are not weak, they simply live by a completely different rhythm. Stay here. The more you understand them, the lighter raising them will feel. And this is exactly where many people misjudge Shih Tzus from the very beginning, then later blame the breed for being difficult. In reality, Shih Tzus aren't hard to raise. The owner's lifestyle simply doesn't match the biology of that coat. A Shih Tzu's coat is hair, not fur. It behaves like human hair. It doesn't shed seasonally to renew itself. It doesn't naturally separate to release heat. And it doesn't self-clean the way fur does on many other breeds. When grooming is delayed, the issue isn't just cosmetic. Matted hair pulls on the skin, creating constant tension, and that tension keeps the dog's nervous system in a low-grade state of irritation over time. This explains why some Shih Tzus suddenly become irritable, avoid touch, or resist being held, not because of temperament, but because their body is being continuously overstimulated. I've met countless owners who say, "Lately he's become so stubborn he won't let me brush him, won't let me touch his legs." When examined, almost every one of those dogs had mats pulling at the skin, sometimes even mild inflammation at the hair roots. For Shih Tzus, grooming isn't about looking pretty. It's a form of sensory regulation. When the coat is brushed evenly and the skin can breathe, the body naturally downshifts and behavior softens along with it. On the other hand, the benefits of hair are very real in daily life. Shih Tzus shed less, don't leave tumbleweeds of fur around the house, and are often easier for people with sensitivities to live with. But the trade-off is clear. You have to participate in the care process. You don't need a long, flowing show coat. A short, clean, climate-appropriate cut that fits your lifestyle is far better than a beautiful coat that exhausts both dog and owner. If you're living with a Shih Tzu, ask yourself this honestly. Are you grooming for appearance or grooming for comfort? Those two goals don't always align. And when you choose comfort, something interesting happens. Your Shih Tzu starts to cooperate more, resist less, and bond more deeply during those care moments that once felt like constant battles. If every brushing session has ever felt like a war, leave a comment saying grooming so you know you're not alone. If this section helped you see grooming differently, give it a like so fewer Shih Tzu owners and dogs have to struggle. And don't forget to subscribe, because in the next parts we'll talk about short facial structure, breathing, and the things many Shih Tzu owners unknowingly overlook. Understand the coat, and you'll understand much more about the small dog living beside you every day. And if you're sighing at this point because you recognize yourself in this story, you're not alone. So many people have said to me, "He knows exactly what I'm saying, but he pretends not to hear." Sound familiar? The truth is, Shih Tzus hear just fine. The issue is that their brains weren't designed to react automatically to commands, but to evaluate context. They're always asking one very simple and very inconvenient question for owners. Is this worth doing? With working breeds, cooperation is instinctive. Doing the right thing creates satisfaction. But for Shih Tzus, satisfaction doesn't come from pleasing humans. It comes from maintaining personal agency. That's why the more you push, raise your voice, or repeat commands, the slower, more distracted, or more disengaged a Shih Tzu becomes, sometimes even turning away. This isn't defiance. It's a self-protective response when they feel their sense of control is being invaded. What's fascinating is how dramatically a Shih Tzu changes when you shift your approach. You don't need to speak louder. You don't need to be stricter. You only need to be clearer and more consistent. Shih Tzus respond extremely well to motivation-based training. Small rewards, delivered at the right moment, for the right behavior. And rewards don't always have to be food. Sometimes it's the privilege of staying close to you a little longer, a gentle touch, or a well-timed rest. For a Shih Tzu, these signals carry enormous biological value. If you've ever felt frustrated because your Shih Tzu doesn't learn quickly, take a step back and ask yourself this. Are you teaching so your dog can understand or so you can feel in control? The difference may seem subtle on the surface, but it's massive in the dog's experience. When a Shih Tzu feels respected, cooperation appears naturally a little slower, perhaps, but far more durable. This is what I always tell Shih Tzu owners. This is not a breed meant to showcase training achievements. This is a breed built to form relationships. You can't break a Shih Tzu into compliance, but when you learn to negotiate with calmness, you gain a small companion who is intelligent, confident, and deeply loyal in their own unique way. And if you're still here at this point, chances are you're beginning to grasp something essential. Shih Tzus aren't hard to train, they just refuse to be treated like tools. Once that perspective shifts, behavior starts to make sense, feel lighter, and become easier to live with for both sides. And it's right here that many harmful misunderstandings begin to form. When people hear a Shih Tzu wheeze slightly, snore softly while sleeping, or tire more quickly in hot weather, they're quick to label the breed as weak, sickly, or fragile. From a biological perspective, though, that interpretation is far too simplistic for a very specific body structure. The short facial structure of the Shih Tzu means their airway is shorter and narrower. Incoming air has less space to buffer, and heat dissipation through panting is less efficient than in long-nosed breeds. This doesn't mean Shih Tzus are unhealthy. It means they were never designed to live in hot, noisy, fast-paced conditions. When you take a Shih Tzu outside under harsh midday sun or push them to exercise like athletic breeds, their body reacts quickly to protect itself, slowing down, lying down, or breathing more heavily. The same logic applies to their large, slightly protruding eyes. This is a result of the shortened skull, and is what gives Shih Tzus their very human-like, emotionally expressive look. But the trade-off is higher exposure to dust, dryness, and irritation. Many people only see the cute part and forget that a Shih Tzu's eyes need daily observation, not with anxiety, but with gentle, consistent awareness. A bit of redness, a little discharge, rubbing the eyes more than usual, these are early signals, not things to ignore. Then there are the facial folds, often dismissed as something you wipe once in a while. For Shih Tzus, these folds are sensitive skin areas that trap moisture and can easily become inflamed if neglected. When they aren't properly dried, discomfort builds quietly over time. Dogs don't complain. They simply become less patient, avoid contact, or rub their faces more often. And then owners mistakenly interpret this as a personality issue. The most important lesson the short-faced structure teaches Shih Tzu owners is this. Observe instead of comparing. Don't ask why a Shih Tzu isn't like a long-nosed dog. Ask what this body needs to breathe easier, stay cooler, and feel more comfortable. When you adjust the environment, temperature, activity, pace, eye, and skin care, you'll see that Shih Tzus aren't fragile at all. They're simply more honest about their physical limits. And when you begin to respect those biological boundaries, something very clear happens. Shih Tzus become more relaxed, behavior stabilizes, and the relationship between you and your dog becomes far less tense. Not because you're doing more, but because you're understanding better. And once your understanding reaches this point, something very interesting becomes clear. Many of what people call behavior problems in Shih Tzus aren't behavioral at all. They're biological signals being misunderstood. A Shih Tzu that avoids going outside at noon isn't lazy. One that rubs its face or shakes its head isn't being difficult for no reason. One that stretches out on cool tile flooring isn't being defiant. That body is simply self-regulating in the fastest way it knows how. In real-life care, I see many owners who love their Shih Tzus deeply, yet unintentionally place them in environments unfriendly to a short-faced structure. Homes that are too hot, air that's too dry, walks scheduled during peak heat, faces wiped quickly but left damp. None of these cause immediate problems. They accumulate, and Shih Tzus are a breed that responds with silence long before they respond with behavior. The biggest difference between experienced Shih Tzu owners and first-time owners isn't money spent on care or expensive accessories. It's the ability to read very early signals. A slightly altered breathing rhythm, eyes that look a little less bright, lying down earlier than usual. When you begin to notice these details, Shih Tzus suddenly feel much easier to live with, because you're addressing issues before they become problems, instead of chasing consequences afterward. And this ties directly to everything discussed earlier. Shih Tzus weren't built to endure. They don't have the push a little longer mechanism found in working breeds. When their body isn't okay, they withdraw. When the environment isn't right, they slow down. Not because they're weak, but because they're honest about their biological limits. If humans did this more often, we might burn out less too. If you're watching this and suddenly thinking, so that's why he's not actually difficult, that realization is the most important moment in living with a Shih Tzu. From that point on, you stop forcing them to adapt to your world. You begin adjusting the world slightly to fit that small body. And in return, you get a calmer dog, more cooperation, and a much deeper emotional connection. The deeper you go, the clearer it becomes. Shih Tzus don't ask you to be a perfect owner. They only need you to be perceptive enough to notice when their body is speaking for them. And when you learn to hear that, the relationship between you and that small companion shifts into something entirely different, quieter, lighter, and far more real. And as we come to the end of this video, if I'm allowed to leave you with one very slow thought, it would be this. Shih Tzus don't enter your life to become an easy dog, a perfectly obedient one, or a breed that fits every situation. They arrive with a very specific body, a very specific history, and a very different rhythm. When you understand that, much of the frustration quietly falls away. You stop asking why they aren't like other dogs. You begin observing instead how they're breathing today, how their eyes look, whether they seem comfortable. I've met many Shih Tzu owners who came to me exhausted, tired from trying to train, tired from trying to fix, tired from believing they were doing something wrong. And almost every time, when they slowed down, shifted their attention to the dog's body before outside advice, things began to ease. Not because the Shih Tzu changed, but because the owner's perspective did. Live with a Shih Tzu long enough, and you'll realize this isn't a breed meant to be controlled. It's a breed that asks you to adjust yourself, to adjust your pace, your expectations, the way you share space with another living being. And in that process, many people discover something unexpectedly calm. When you treat the body of a small dog more gently, you also begin treating yourself more gently. If you're living with a Shih Tzu now, you'll likely understand these truths sooner or later. If you're considering one, I hope this video helps you step into that relationship with understanding rather than expectation. You don't need perfection, just enough awareness, enough respect, and enough patience. That's all a Shih Tzu truly needs. And very often, it's all we need too.